Well, howdy, travelers. I hope y'all are well, and I hope life hadn't been surprising you too much of late. Life gives and life takes. It's a maze full of twists and turns, and at every juncture, we're met with a choice. Which way do you go? We all try to make the right choice, don't we? The truth is, you never really know if it's the right one, not until you're looking back at it. This story is about a woman named Isha. She ain't so different from you or me, just someone trying to hold on, trying to do right. But sometimes, even the right choice can open the wrong door. In the wet-mouthed mire of the southern lowlands, there sat an old farmhouse slouched beneath a canopy of trees, its fields grown wild and quiet, save for the goats that still wandered the fence line. Time moved different there. It was a house wrapped in morning mist and old magic. "Hey, baby," Mama would say in the reflection of the washroom mirror. When Isha was a little girl, she would watch her mother as she brushed her hair with that beautiful silver brush. Her mother was a woman of elegance and smart as a whip, too, make no mistake. She taught Isha more than a few things about being a lady in such days as those, troubled as they were and still remain. Isha saw her mother's lessons as gifts, but her favorite gift of all was her eyes. Stark and bright blue, they practically glowed in the mornings, and they had been passed down to Isha. Every morning, the lantern her mother carried would light up the symbols engraved above the doors. Loops, hooks, and lines her mother said would keep sickness and spirits from crossing the threshold. Isha had grown so used to them she hardly saw them anymore, the way one stops noticing freckles on a loved one's face. Some mornings, her mother whispered small, wicked things in her ear, and Isha would bite her lip to keep from laughing. Other times they just smiled to themselves, the sound of brushing filling the room, scrape, pull, the soft shake of hair onto the floor. When the tangles were gone, they'd twist their hair up, mother first, pins clicking into place with practiced fingers, then Isha, her clumsy bun corrected by gentle hands. That was the routine. The water cooled, the lamp burned steady, and the world outside waited its turn. It became something of a tradition, one that Isha looked forward to sharing with her own daughter one day. When Mama passed, Isha continued the tradition every morning. That was about the time Porter came along. A long-legged cattle dog with ears too big for her head and eyes that followed Isha from room to room. Porter would lie at the washroom door, chin in her paws, watching as Isha brushed her hair. "Hey, baby," Isha would say to her. Even now, long after her mother had moved on to that next place, that simple little room still held the shape of her mother's presence. A presence that became Isha's, like an outline she'd stepped into at some point. She couldn't exactly remember when that had happened, but one day, maybe when she wasn't looking, the torch had been passed to her. Then, everything seemed to stop when the doctor gave the news. Something had sprouted in her brain, and with it came terrible headaches, violent mood shifts, sharp pains that could bring her to her knees. Isha imagined it as a little black spot of something nasty that had crawled in her ear as she slept, like an earwig that crept its way inside her skull. That thought was not comfortable, but having an image in her mind of the sickness was better than, "Sorry girl, you're gonna die, and we ain't got no answers." Not long after receiving the news, Isha found that walking was getting harder. Her legs wouldn't always do what she said. She was getting winded faster. She couldn't even lift the milk pail without her fingers giving way and making an awful mess. She spent more and more time in bed, And Teddy, her dear, sweet Teddy, spent more and more time watching over her. She had stopped brushing her hair altogether when large clumps of it started falling out. She didn't see much point in brushing her scalp. Life had been shifting consistently for Isha over the last year or so. It was when she awoke earlier than usual one morning that everything shifted yet again. She was awake a good hour before Teddy usually roused. The night was dark and dead quiet. She lifted her head from her pillow and looked down. Her legs felt, well, she couldn't say what her legs felt. She reached down and gripped her thigh. She could feel how thin she'd grown. Her hand squeezed her bony knee and felt its knob press into her palm. But her leg felt nothing. Isha tried to lift her foot, but it wouldn't obey. She tried wiggling her toes, but they might as well have been dead. The black spot in her brain had begun eating at her slowly, and for such a small thing, its hunger was endless. She reached over to wake Teddy and stopped herself. Her hand trembled as it hovered over his shoulder. At that moment, a horrible thought occurred to Isha. She was probably never going to walk again, which meant yesterday evening she had taken her last steps. In that moment, she knew there was no getting better. As soon as she woke Teddy, she'd be halfway dead, and he would never sleep the whole night through again, not until she was gone at least. She didn't know if she was ready to start that, the beginning of the end. Something cold and moist pressed into her cheek. Porter's snout reached over the edge of the bed. The tip of her tongue barely peeked from behind her lips. She was a good girl and knew Isha wasn't a fan of slobbery kisses. Isha was relieved to have someone else awake with her before she included Teddy. She rolled to one side and pulled the dog's head close to hers. "I think we're getting closer, girl," she said, and weakly brushed her thumb between Porter's eyes. Then she remembered. She had kissed Teddy goodnight. She told him she loved him, and he'd kept his hand on her belly longer than usual. Something about that exodus sat right with Isha. She wouldn't feel too raw if that was the last memory she gave him. Porter whined, not understanding what was happening. "It's okay. I'm not scared anymore." Tonight was the night. At least, part of her hoped it was. Teddy snored to one side of her, and on the other was her loyal dog. She couldn't think of a better way to go. Good old Porter and her beautiful Teddy. They were the ones with the hard job. However long the path was, they would walk it without her. Isha had the easy part, far as she was concerned. All she had to do was lay there and breathe her last, which is what she figured she was in the middle of doing when she heard something whine in the shadows. The washroom door creaked open, and Porter's ears shot up. A string of flickering firelight shot from the doorway and stretched across the black hall. Something stepped into the light. The black outline of a woman in a gown, and in her hand she held a candle that shed light over the hall, but revealed none of her features. There was someone in their home. Once, Isha would have gotten up and dealt with the interloper herself. She kept a knife on her side of the bed for just such an occasion. Isha about screamed at the top of her lungs, but Porter beat her to the punch. She was alight with worry and barking fiercely at the intruder. That'll wake Teddy up for sure, Isha thought. His snore didn't so much as catch in his throat. She reached for him and shoved him hard, but he would not wake. Isha began to realize she'd have to tend to this herself. There wasn't no way she was gonna go and die the night some crazed hussy decided to break into her home. No sir, ain't no way, no how. If there were two things Isha's daddy had told her, the first would have been how to two-step. The second was that they don't abide trespassers in this house. She mustered her strength and reached back for the knife she kept under the mattress. She arched her back, pushing herself painfully over with one arm, and felt the wooden grip. She took the knife and held it out, pointed it down the dark hallway, aimed right at the center of the shadow woman. Isha had a mind to defend her home and the will to act, but action demanded a body that worked. The intruder's presence had so shaken her, she hadn't even considered how she was going to get out of the bed and drive her off. She supposed she could crawl? Maybe just jab at her feet with what strength she had left, so long as the intruder held still for Isha, that is. "You've come to the wrong house," she said and held her knife out, barely able to prop herself up. "Take your leave, and you'll have nothing to fear." There was a long stretch of silence, an awkward one that felt too akin to accidentally walking in on someone using the outhouse. The woman cloaked in shadow began to drift toward the bedroom. Isha's hands trembled uncontrollably as the woman, or thing, neared closer and closer. As the ghostly figure swayed into the bedroom, Porter's bark shriveled and became a low whine as she took a step back and lowered herself to her belly. The shade moved around to Isha's side of the bed and stopped. It loomed over Isha, who had somehow wedged herself between the wall and Teddy's back. Porter had laid herself across Isha's legs, which made her look less of a terrifying and snarling beast and more of a pitiful and pleading little thing. Isha worked hard to maintain her composure. "What do you want?" The shadow moved closer still, and it set the candle down on the table beside the bed. As if she moved into the light, the shadow faded from her, and a face formed. It was a face Isha knew. The knife fell from Isha's shocked hand and clattered to the floor. "Mama?" Her mother smiled, that warm smile of hers that reached her bright blue eyes. "Hey, baby." Isha threw her arms around her mother, and they held each other for what felt like hours. Porter didn't take her eyes off of them. "You come to take me with you? To send me to that next place?" Mama smiled playfully. "Not yet." "Then why are you here?" Mama leaned close enough that her cheek brushed Isha's. "Well, to help." Her mother stood and took her candle from the bedside table. She smiled down at Isha and turned for the door. "Come with me." "Mama, wait. I can't. I can't even walk. I can barely breathe." "So crawl." Porter had watched Mama the whole time she was in the room. It was only when Mama moved down the hall and vanished again that Porter turned back to Isha and instantly set to licking her face and whining. Isha tried to calm her, but the pooch was inconsolable. She tried waking Teddy again, but of course, he wasn't going anywhere. Down the hall, she could see the strip of light coming from the washroom door. The candlelight flickered there like a signal fire, soft and gold against the dark. Her mama was waiting. Isha shifted her hand and tried to push herself up, and the pain came instantly. A blinding, bone-deep surge that lit her joints on fire. Her hips cracked, her ribs screamed. She fell back with a wheeze. She wiped the tears from her eyes and sucked in a big breath. She planted a trembling hand against the mattress and eased towards the edge. The drop to the floor looked small, only 2 feet or so, but to Isha, it was a canyon, a fall that held no promise of getting up again. She hesitated, her breath hitched. She was afraid. But her mother had called her and told her to crawl, and Isha trusted her mother, if no one else. She swung her arm out, grabbed the nightstand, and braced. "I'm sorry," she whimpered to no one. Then she tipped herself off the bed, and the world spun end over end. She hit the floor with a sickening crack, a slap of bone and skin. Her skull hit the floorboards hard enough to burst stars behind her eyes. Her chin bounced. Her breath fled entirely. She tried to put a hand out to take control, but she was too weak and her shoulder wrenched behind her. Isha held her breath and waited. The pain set in. Her ribs burned, her shoulder throbbed icy cold one moment, then burning hot the next. Her hip felt like shattered glass wrapped in skin. Her vision swam, but she was still here. She was still alive. Porter was at her side in an instant, licking and sniffing and whining. "I'm okay, girl," Isha whispered, though it came out more like a sob. She rolled to her side. Pain lanced through her hips, white hot behind her eyes, and she clung to the rug like it was a rope. And then she began to crawl. Her knees dragged behind her like lumpy sacks of stones. The hallway stretched out longer than she remembered, like a joke, like it wanted her to crawl. "Almost there," she whispered. Her hand slipped from under her, a wet thud. The air burst from her lungs, but she kept moving. Isha felt something warm puddle between her legs and streak behind her. She must have pissed herself, but she didn't care. After all, tonight was the night. It was finally time. And as it turned out, Isha had a bit more to do than just lie in bed and breathe her last. What a relief. A bloody smile stretched through the pain at the realization. Isha's fingers wrapped around the door frame as she dragged herself into the light. The washroom was just the same as when she was little, bright and full of life. And at its center stood her mother, just as striking and glowing as she had been all those years ago. She had a regal certainty about her, and it didn't fade as she smiled down at Isha through the reflection. Porter barked with rabid panic as Isha crawled over the threshold. "It's okay, sweet pea," Isha said, exhaustion thick in her voice. The dog's cries grew even more frantic as Isha dragged her dead weight in behind her. "I love you. You're a good girl." She took Porter by the chin and kissed her face. The door softly swung closed and clicked gently shut. The floor was cold on Isha's side, and it pressed into her ribs in painful places. She was twisted and wet, her nightgown completely soaked through with sweat and other fluids Isha didn't want to think about. She had looked down and realized she was bleeding from somewhere, but she couldn't be bothered to care. She had made it, and that was all that mattered. The washroom was warm and bright. The light hurt her head at first, but it faded soon after shutting the door. A sound filled the room that warmed more than just her flesh. Her mother hummed as she looked into the mirror and brushed her long, dark hair with the same silver brush she'd left to Isha. Then she turned to the basin and dipped her long fingers into that steaming rainwater. She splashed her face, and little pieces of moss rushed from her hands. The light from the candle cast stark shadows across her mother's angled and wet face, and Isha reached for her gown. She was fading. "Mama, help me, please. Do you remember this?" Mama asked and bit a piece of mint off between her teeth. "Mint from the garden. I grew it myself, you know. All pieces of a puzzle. Every piece just as vital as the last." Her long fingernail ticked the countertop with a rhythm. "Save one, the most important piece." Isha's hand slipped from the gown and plopped onto the floor. Her vision was fading when she felt something press against her hand. It was her mother's bare foot, pushing Isha's hand across the floorboards. Her fingers dragged over the unlevel edge of a loose one. "There, sweet girl. Right there." Isha could barely get her fingers to follow her instructions, but she managed to get the loose board up and sent it clattering to the other side of the room. Her mother's feet thudded heavily as she straddled the hole. "Ah, there it is." Isha couldn't see. She wrapped her fingers around the hole's edge and pulled. She peeked over the edge, and one glance was all it took. She screamed a helpless and shrill scream that made her lurch away. In the hole was a hand mirror. She had had Teddy take the mirrors out of the house months ago. She hadn't seen herself since. She hadn't seen what the sickness had made of her. She knew her hair was falling out, and there was only a thin layer of silky strands that remained. What she didn't know was how her skin had seemed to molt away, how badly her lips had dried and cracked and now bled, how her teeth had yellowed and rotted down to stumps, how her once bright blue eyes, given to her by her mother, had faded and fogged over and turned a milky, sickly gray. Isha was a horror. She thought she looked like a corpse. But that wasn't what filled her with such fear. In the mirror behind her stood a being that wore her mother's face like a mask. Her face stretched unnaturally down at Isha. Her eyes were black holes and surrounded by 1,000 wrinkles. "You're mighty skittish for a seer," the thing that wore her mother's face said. "I'm no seer, and you're not my mama." "She never told you." "Ha ha, fancy that. That's just downright clever." "I want no quarrel with you, spirit. I'm dying. Let me do it in peace." "Oh, I know you're dying, sweetie. I've been here a long time now, long enough to watch you." Isha's heart pounded in her chest. She felt like she was going to vomit, but her stomach only retched in on itself. You can't be here. This house is blessed, protected by the glyphs of the old gods." The spirit grinned impossibly wider and chuckled. "Those symbols carved over the doors? You thought they were meant to keep my kind out?" The spirit that wore her mother's face dropped to her haunches and looked Isha square in the eye. "No, sweet girl. Those glyphs are bars on a cage. This place has been my home long before it was ever yours." "What are you talking about?" "Your mother, darling thing that she was, thought it was wise to keep me here. I'd stowed away from the old world on one of your ships, you see, and when we made land here, after months at sea, I stretched my wings." She spread her arms wide. The room seemed to expand with her. "I was free of the old ways of the old world, and free to roam and take and consume and fester at my leisure, until, of course, I came to be seen by her, your mother. She trapped me here." "You're one of the first hungers," Isha said with reverence. "She told you a thing or two after all, huh? No, I'm little people compared to them, darling. I tried to tell her it was a mistake. I'm really not so bad once you get to know me." But she wouldn't hit. She was a special woman, your mother. She had fled Red March in hopes to get away from those zealots. There, she'd have been made a proper seer. You know what they did to seers there, don't you? And you people call me twisted. The demon cocked her mother's distorted head to the side. "You're a lot like her, you know. How better to keep you safe and keep me locked away than by ritual?"
"My mother taught me no ritual."
The creature raised her brows at Isha, like she was waiting for her to put it all together. Isha thought of the routine her mother would act out every morning, without fail. She'd brush her hair and wash her face.
"That was just a routine, nothing more."
I say yay, you say nay, but here I am, nonetheless. What do you make of that, girl? She hated to admit it, but the thing was starting to make sense.
"What do you want from me?"
"I want to make a deal. There's something else in that hole, darling. Take another peek." Isha didn't want to see herself, not again, so she shut her eyes and reached her hand inside. She could feel the metal of the mirror, and next to it, there was something else. A curved glass. A vial. She held it up to the light. A small vial with dark blue liquid inside. She didn't know what it was, but every sense she had was screaming at her. Every thought was urging her, pleading her, begging her not to open that vial.
What is it?
For you and me, we'll call it a door. Mama had never told her everything, but she had told her about spirits, about the hungry forces in the world, how some could join to a person. She told horror stories of mourning mothers becoming yonder mares, preying on lost souls, eating what was given.
You want to cross over through me?
The demon that wore her mother's face spread its hands like a salesman, meaning no offense. You won't even know I'm there, quiet as a mouse. I'm quieter even. Sharp tenant too. I almost never pay rent late. Isha didn't need to hear any more. She knew what she had to do. She would not drink. She would not give this beast what it wanted. She squeezed the vial tight in her fist and raised it up high with every intention of shattering it across the floor. Then she was swept back and slammed against the door Porter was barking on the other side of. Let's not give in to our baser instincts here, Isha. I'm trying to cultivate a rapport with you.
I won't do it. I'm not powerless.
A look of frustration washed over the being's face, and in an instant, it was on the ground with Isha inches from her and whispering in her ear. Yes, you are, girl. Right now, that's exactly what you are. Your mother thought she could shield you with ignorance. She was wrong. The being pushed even closer, and Isha could feel its hot, sour breath lap at her cheek. If you don't drink that fucking vial and let me in, I'll watch you die here. This face will be the last thing you see. What would Teddy think if he finds you? What would Teddy do if you appeared to him as I've appeared to you? Do you think he'd drink if you asked him to? I think he just might. Isha felt like a little mouse caught in a trap. The demon sat back on her haunches. The wrinkles eased and her mother's blue eyes faded back into view. The wide smile was replaced with her mother's soft one. I'd rather you take my deal, though. It's a lot more fun for you. If you drink and let me in, I'll heal you. Just like that, you'll be cured, and you and Teddy can go on living your happy little lives together until he dies, which he will because, let's face it, he doesn't have the connections you do. And then it'll be my turn. It sat back and grinned ear to ear. See? I told you I wasn't so bad. And that's not a bad deal. Matter of fact, I think it's a damn good deal. More thoughts were rushing through Isha's mind than there were stars in the sky. But the one that clung to her like a sickness was what this thing would do to her sweet Teddy. If this thing were to appear to him in her form, he would drink. He would do whatever she asked.
Why do you wait until now?
The thing wearing her mother's face looked amused. You stopped brushing your hair. That was the spell that kept me silent, silly girl. Isha would have laughed if she had had the energy. She looked down and eyed the vial in her hand, ran her thumb along the side of the cork. The water was cool, the lamp burned steady, and the world outside waited its turn. The sun was already high by the time Teddy blinked awake. Light poured through the window. He was more tired than usual, so he shut his eyes again. Out of habit, his hand drifted back behind him. One light touch, just his pinky, was all he dared these days. Anything more might send her into a frenzy of pain. But there was only cold linen where her body should have been. Teddy's eyes flew open. She was gone. The blankets were twisted and empty. His gaze locked onto the sharp corner of the side table, jostled, sitting at an odd angle. He lunged across the bed, sure he'd find her crumpled on the floor, head cracked open. But there were only floorboards, and a streak of something part wet and part dried, trailing into the hall. His breath caught. Porter was lying belly down outside the washroom door. The door hadn't been shut in months. Teddy was up in an instant and following the trail. As it extended down the hall, he noticed it grew darker with red. Porter looked back and sprang to her feet, tail thrashing in tight, frantic circles. Not the kind that said, "I missed you," the kind that screamed, "Where the hell have you been?" His hand hesitated on the doorknob. This was always her favorite room. The door creaked open. The washroom looked the same. Streaked mirror, mildew-stained floorboards. But she was there, curled on her side, her gown soaked through, blood in the fabric. He didn't rush. It felt like she had chosen this place. He knelt and slipped a hand beneath her head, kissed her and held her. He hadn't touched her this much since the diagnosis. Porter stayed at the threshold, whining. She wouldn't come in. Teddy's eyes filled with tears. Then he felt it. The pull, like when a lover stirs after the moment has passed. Isha moved. She was alive. He gasped and held her tight, face buried in her neck. Then her fingers moved, brushing through his hair. He pulled back to see her and saw her smile. Porter whined again, low and trembling, her ears flat, her tail stiff, teeth barely showing.
"What's the matter, girl?"
Isha said, voice calm.
"It's me. It's just me."
She reached out, and Porter stepped back and growled. Hurt flickered across Isha's face, but she turned to Teddy, and he was glad. He wanted her eyes on him. She looked the same, still skin and bone, still thin and brittle, but still his wife. But her eyes, they weren't fogged anymore. They shone clear and sharp like glass held to flame, the same bright blue they'd always been.
"I'm here,"
she said and touched his cheek. Her hand was cold as she spoke to him.
"Hey, baby."
Some choices, once made, don't let you come back. Some doors only open one way. Isha made her choice, and whether it was right or wrong, that ain't up to me. But if you ask Porter, well, dogs always know, don't they? Rest easy, travelers. Got a long day ahead of you tomorrow. Keep your fire lit, 'cause we ain't alone out here. From Shallow Graves is owned and produced by Smug Rust Studios. Today's episode was written and performed by Red Edwards. You can find these stories on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you're a fan and want to support the show, join our Patreon for early access, extended cuts, and behind-the-scenes fragments. Share your own whispers by joining us at R from Shallow Graves on Reddit and from Shallow Graves on Blue Sky. And don't forget to like, follow, and spread the word, whether it's on a feed or around your own campfire. Nothing travels farther than word of mouth. Thanks for listening.